is through research. We know that it's not if we grow, it's how we grow. The Fate Alliance focuses on how by working with experts to conduct research on the complex issues facing our community's development. And the third way we achieve our mission is through education. Citizens Planning Academy is the premier educational offering from Fate Alliance. We want our citizens to get involved and understand the issues that affect our community. We also have various in-person events like this one, now happening on Zoom, to hear from local experts on a variety of smart growth topics throughout the year. Through our programs, our newsletter, and our various social channels, we want our community to understand how land use decisions impact our economic development, our environment, our quality of life, as well as how to advocate for smart and equitable land use policy. So before we jump in, I do want to mention a few housekeeping items. Everyone is on mute, so I'll ask each of you to remain on mute until we go into our breakout sessions later this evening. We ask that any questions that you all have are actually placed in the chat at the bottom of your screen. One of our team members who I'd also like to introduce here will be starting the chat and just show it as a way to enter all your questions. So again, as we hear from our panelists and our speakers, please feel free to put a chat or a question in the chat box. And when we get to the Q&A section, I will be choosing questions and we'll try and get to as many questions as possible. Everyone should have received your packet of information for tonight. That included the agenda, the breakout session questions, the term definitions, and the resources. So this will help guide everybody through our session. And as a reminder, last week we discussed Planning 101. Tonight we will discuss promoting our farms. Next week we will discuss responsible infrastructure like water, sewer, and transportation. And on August 11th, we will discuss growing our city. So I also wanted to remind everybody that on August 11th, we will be having a lunch and learn on equity and land use at noon, where we will hear from our keynote speaker, Chris Zimmerman, from Smart Growth America, which is an organization based in Washington, D.C. So this session is going to be a supplement to our Growing Our City evening Citizens Planning Academy discussion and is not required for CPA participants, but we absolutely encourage you to come and tell as many people as you can. We'll be advertising that on social media, sending it out via email so you guys know that we'd love to have you there. We'll hear from our panelists first, followed by question and answer. And then last, we will have our breakout sessions where we'll break everyone up into random groups via Zoom. And then you guys can use those sessions to talk about what you've learned this evening. So just before we get into our, we get into our panelists and I have the pleasure of introducing them, I just wanted to talk a little bit about agriculture. So agriculture is really Lexington's factory floor. It's such a critical piece of our community, of our economy, and why our community has such a high quality of life. You will hear from our wonderful speakers today, all who have varied roles and focus areas in agriculture, about the impact and importance of it in our community. It accounts for $2 billion of our economy on an annual basis and 1 out of 12 jobs in Fayette County. Agriculture means many different things. It means soybeans, it means fruit and vegetables, it means hemp, it means horses, cattle, tobacco, and more, and all the living things that can thrive because of Lexington's fertile, nationally significant soil. Our green space and our rural land draws people to our community, and many people's favorite thing about Lexington is that you can drive 15 minutes from wherever you are and be in farmland. As you learned in Planning 101, the urban services boundary was originally put into place to limit infrastructure costs, not to the city, not to preserve agricultural land, but it did have that effect, and our agricultural community continued to grow and to thrive, and we've made preserving land in Fayette County for agriculture a priority in our community. In 1999, our community created the Rural Land Management Plan, which was an extensive effort to manage how we use that land in our rural service area. Out of that plan came programs like the Purchase of Development Rights, which is a city-run program that receives a mix of local, state, and federal dollars to preserve critical nationally significant land. But that plan put into place many other policies which help our farmland to be productive as well as protected, so it can continue to be a booming force in our city. There's a perception by some that growing a thriving, sustainable city is not compatible with preserving our fertile, truly unique land. So I want to pose to you all today that these things make each other possible. They're two sides of the same coin, and that we should continue to value this balance while we look for solutions to our city's challenges. Both our productive farmland and our thriving city, and the relationship between those two things, have made our community a successful, resilient, diverse economy for decades. What we do want to focus on, however, as we continue to promote our farms here in Lexington, is accessibility and equity in agriculture, and what kind of work we can do as a community to increase representation and support in these fields by people of color who have for so long not been recognized for their role or success here. How do we promote our farms equitably and inclusively and intentionally? As I said before, here at Fate Alliance, our question is not if we grow, but how we grow. And that's why we focus on how we can balance our thriving city with our really productive and unique farmland. We must do it responsibly, we must do it sustainably, and we must do it equitably. So without further ado, I'm happy to introduce our speakers who will tell you more about how they're doing that work. We're so lucky to have them tonight. We have with us Ashley Smith, Allison Davis, and Greg Harbut. Ashley Smith, who will be speaking to us first, is the co-founder and COO of Black Soil, Our Better Nature. Dr. Allison Davis is H.B. Price Professor of Agricultural Economics, Director of the Community and Economic Development Initiative of Kentucky, and editor of Choices Magazine. And Greg Harbut is the president of Harbut Bloodstock Agency. So we're so happy that you all are here, that all of you citizens of Fayette County and beyond have joined us. And so I will turn it over to Ashley Smith of Black Soil.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Brittany. And Ashley, if you wouldn't mind, would you mind sharing my presentation from your screen? When I pulled it up, it looked crazy. So thank you for helping me. And while she's preparing that, I do want to thank my alma mater, Fayette Alliance, for having me this evening. Forgive the up the chin shot. I cannot get settled in a place that I have sustainable internet signal. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I want to acknowledge the sponsors who made a way for this program to happen at no cost to students. My former coworkers, thank you for the work that you've put into continuing this program as we celebrate, 10 years of the work here in the community. And just a little bit about how we got started as the presentation comes up. In our first slide, we really set the tone around the problem. And Black Soil is a solution-based social enterprise. So we are not a nonprofit, though many folks perceive us to be one. We do have a charitable fund, an escrow account that it's held at our fiscal agent. So the Black Soil Charitable Fund has been established and running for about a year now. And so there we go, perfect. Thank you so much. As we progress to the next slide. Anything in life, especially in agriculture, it's really about troubleshooting and problem solving. And the unique journey that I've had throughout my career here in Lexington has taken me through many industries and sectors. And so prior to arriving at the Fate Alliance in July 2017, I was for 2.5 years doing that. And so I was a bright-eyed arts administrator diving into this new industry and sector of agriculture. I really didn't have a strong grasp on the importance or the contributions in which local ag had on my day-to-day life. And so as I quickly sat in my seat through my office work and going to city hall meetings, I was startled. I was taken aback by the robust, resounding, unlimited possibilities found within agriculture. And I also very quickly saw that individuals in my community that I was very familiar with, entrepreneurs, other business leaders, weren't dialed in very thoroughly into the local conversation around agriculture, local food systems, foodways, ag business. And so when I say we, my co-founder, my life partner, Trevor Claiborne, AKA Farmer Brown, the MC, who had already been doing this work for about 3.5 years when we started Black Soil in 2017. We wanted to really focus on research-based, evidence-driven points in which we drove our mission and our vision deep down into the ground. We planted those seeds and those roots began to spread. And as we looked around, me as a very green rookie looked around the industry and started doing the research around, wealth inequity and disparities. I really was able to dial in that agriculture of all of our industries and sectors should be one of the most equitable and equal and most laid out areas of our capitalistic society. Because if Mother Nature doesn't see who plants the seed, and then that zucchini or squash or tomatoes goes to the market, such as Kroger, Walmart, so on and so forth, then we must first tackle this very, very last talking point on this first slide, that when we look at the product valuation of Black farms here in the state of Kentucky, they're valued at a little over $10 million compared to their white counterparts and their product valuation at over $5 billion. So I knew there was some traction to be had, and so we continued to dig in. And we started to put together a historic narrative that strategically and systematically decentralize African Americans from the agricultural industry and sector. And so as we continue to progress along in gathering data, we saw that 40% of our food goes to waste, yet food insecurity is ravishing our urban and rural communities. Collectively in the Black land owning community here in America, 30,000 acres of family land is lost. And right now in the state of Kentucky, less than 2% of the overall farmers are Black. And so as we again look deep into this very profitable, very strategically diverse industry of agriculture, we had to ask, well, then why this disparity? And if Ashley, we can advance to the next slide. We then wanted to focus on a story. We wanted to take people through a narrative to help them understand how systems and policies and institutionalizing those things move people out of the way to a point where they're crippled beyond understanding the dynamic innovations in which they were once centrally a part of. And so here in the state of Kentucky, in the beginning, we were an agricultural state that cultivated billions of dollars from hemp, tobacco, or equine distilling. And the very interesting part that oftentimes is left out of the story, that strategic erasure, is the African Americans who were enslaved on the plantations, either urban or rural, throughout the state of Kentucky. Yes, in our rural communities as well. But mainly here in the county, Fayette County, we primarily focused on finding and seeking out Black landowners. And so again, in the very beginning, as you can hear the rooster in the background, in the very beginning of us putting our company together, we had a real struggle with identifying and finding Black landowners here in Lexington, Fayette County. So we took our sites and we piloted a program in southwestern Kentucky in Hart County, where 4 of the 7 siblings have returned to farming, where they farm right now on 150 acres that were formerly sharecropped. They purchased that land from the tenant farmer. And so from there, we formulated an approach that was focused around creative placemaking that helped build infrastructure for these rural and marginalized operations. We then were able to cultivate farm-to-table dinners to help source these products, and then work with underutilized culinary artists across the state to prepare these incredible vegetables and fruits coming off these farms. And so yet again, the story of Black soil and wanting to advance its mission of reconnecting Black Kentuckians to their heritage and legacy in agriculture. Because again, with the erasure of an entire population from an industry, it's very easy to have folks being excited about hemp, which at one point in time was referred to as the N-word crop, and white men wouldn't even touch it. Where here in the state of Kentucky, we cultivated fields and fields of tobacco, and we have a tobacco master settlement fund held through the governor's office of ag policy, but we question the equitable distribution amongst Black farmers here in the state. And so we really worked to address high arching, far reaching problems through solution-based focused education and outreach. And so we also work to improve the quality of life of Kentucky's African American community by working to connect our rural-based farmers to urban consuming public markets and outlets, so they're able to build consistency in their income. And so since our start in 2017, we've continued from just one farm family in that relationship in Hart County to now moving throughout the state in all of our regions and having touch points in 27 Kentucky counties. But as the adage says, there's no love for the prophet in their hometown. And now, almost 3 years later, we're finally coming back to Lexington, Fayette County with a strong roster of Black landowners and farmers here in the county. And so when we started, I was at a loss. I knew of a gentleman in Utteringtown. And as we speak of our illustrious equine industry, we must always and foremost recognize the enslaved men and the enslaved women who built up the profitable, affluent horse farms that scatter throughout Lexington, Fayette County. And nestled around those horse farms are historic settlements, are hamlets. And there are about 25 located throughout the county. And so as we've worked our way through the state, we finally returned back to our hometown. And I'm so pleased, Ashley, as you advance the next slide, to talk about how we work in, again, 27 counties. And I'll leave this service area up because it's substantial. It means something. And as we focus on creating land-based wealth strategies here in the city of Lexington, we look at our historic hamlets as those epicenters located in our rural service area. This is language that I learned when I worked at the Fayette Alliance, which taught me one of my best professional lessons in how to advocate for myself, then turn around and teach others how to advocate for themselves. And so that really has been the essence of us advancing our work. And Ashley, if you advance, please, to the next slide. We focus in several services. So you heard a little bit about how we dipped our toe in the water with agritourism, because we believed in cultivating a conversation with a population that looks at an industry through a very traumatic experience. Think about being forced into a role or a task against your will, being born into that generation after generation, not having the power or agency, not being able to know if your family's going to be able to stay together or not. So we had to be able to provide immersive experiences for folks coming from our urban areas onto our farms for the farm tours and the farm to table dinners. We then bring our rural producers up to our urban areas through our off-season workshops. We spoke a little bit about the land-based wealth strategies, where you see 3 of our Fayette County entities listed here. Coleman Crest is a 131-year-old Black-owned farm. Jim Coleman's great-grandfather purchased this, a former enslaved person in Utteringtown, Lexington. And now Mr. Coleman is moving back to his hometown from New York City to cultivate his 12 acres, that fertile, rich soil that's been sitting there untouched for 30 years, where he will then activate an incubator spin program to help new and beginning farmers come onto his land and grow low cost yet high yield crops on a half of an acre, a quarter an acre. Green Landing is located in Cadentown. And we recently received a feature in the Lexington Herald Leader about the work of Mrs. Jo Joanna Green in Cadentown, where she receiving a grant through the Fayette County Conservation District, was able to launch a summer horticulture enrichment program and a rapid response where she broke down in-person instruction there on her plot of land that we helped her regenerate. She also added to the learning experience by having virtual presentations by local stakeholders from our ag community. And the old schoolhouse represents an initiative to cultivate lodging and hospitality spaces within our rural service areas, specifically our hamlets. And former Councilwoman Andrea James and her husband Rodney own a house in Utteringtown, and they're working to transform it into the old schoolhouse, a lodging opportunity for folks traveling throughout the state. agritourism and cultural tourism, market development, and the historic interpretation of agriculture. Black Soil has continued to make history here in the state as we launched the state's only tour, guided tour dedicated to slavery. Traces slavery at Ashland, chronicles the very hard to document, because the documents aren't there, enslaved people at Ashland. And we work to redistribute their agency and power by giving their narratives voice. So we invite you to visit henryclay.org to learn more about how Traces is really helping balance out an equitable telling, a narrative of the origins of agriculture, not only in our country, but our state. Because if we work to romanticize hemp and re-envision its history here, we then dismiss the enslaved Black men who were susceptible to white lung, a respiratory infection that was a result of the laborious, back-breaking harvesting in the bitter cold or the extreme heat of this plant. And so as we've worked so rapidly to pilot a hemp program and give people licensing, we've left out the core group that started this industry. Black males are overcriminalized when it comes to drug convictions, and thus leaving them out, disqualifying them to be able to access hemp pilot licenses here in the state. And so as we look again on how industries can systematize displacement, we work in these services to have a very diversified approach to such a large disparity within this industry. And so we're currently hosting 41 shareholders through our weekly farm shares that source from Black farms across the state. We refer to that as produce with a purpose, as we again work to increase that market development. I mentioned very briefly education and outreach. We've presented across the country, rural and urban communities, to youth who overwhelmingly are disconnected from where their food comes from. And Ashley, as you advance to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the investment. So this company is really a proof of concept. And as we think about the next 5, 10 to 20 years of what Black Soil wants to accomplish, we're going out into our business community and speaking to folks to generate support. But to date, we've been able to ourselves as co-founders invest our hard-earned dollars into these farms, these food brands, these culinary artists, these value-added product vendors, as well as the artists, because we have been able to see how media can leverage very destructive stereotypes when it comes to groups of people. And so we activate our creative class here in the state to help us increase the representation of what Black agriculture is all about. And actually, as you advance the slide, we want to talk about how not only are we doing this on our own, but we've also beckoned other people and people from the business community, such as Visit Lex, our 15 county spanning visitors bureau and tourism bureau, Accelerating Appalachia. University of Kentucky is a major partner, and the Appalachian Impact Fund at the Foundation for Appalachian Kentucky, because again, we are centrally located here in Lexington, but we reach across the state. And on our next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the brands. And so here are some of the organizations, the farm entities that we serve here in Lexington. We represent Kentucky's only Black-owned distillery, that is Silver Springs Farm, nestled at the original James E. Pepper Distillery. Alan and Leslie Carter reside in the distiller's house, which was actually constructed by enslaved men owned by Henry Clay. So all of this is so deeply connected. And as we continue to advance our slides, Ashley will talk a little bit about the external partners and how we're able to advance our mission towards equitable representation and market access. So again, working across different sectors to speak about the need, the universal need, because we all have to eat, right? And we all need more farmers on the field. So the ag industry is consistently shooting itself in the foot by advancing and not bucking against patterns and policies that have been exclusionary. And so our next slide will we'll talk a little bit about the farmers that we do work with. We're located across the state, and we're continuing to advance our support. And recently we were able to launch in partnership with Community Farm Alliance, a 35-year-old ag policy nonprofit based in Berea. We processed and awarded 43 farms here in the state nearly $40,000 in our initial round of funding. And so that's one of the ways that we dig deep into structural incorporation and economic inclusion, because there's a lot to be said of gestures, socially optic gestures, but we really have to decrease that disparity, that product valuation disparity, especially in an industry that really can set the tone for many people to advance and have generations changed. So we refer to the group of farmers, culinary artists, makers that we work with as the recipe. Because when you look up that definition, the layering of ingredients, and we're layering multiple generations of family farmers and new and beginning farmers on the spectrum of experience and expertise. And then we're also asking those people to cultivate relationships focused on empowerment and engagement. And so you can see our farmers here. And as Ashley progresses on, you can see some of the culinary artists. But to talk a little bit more about the farms in Fayette County that we work with. So I've made mention of those who are regenerating the land. But what about those who are still active? Mr. David Spencer in Utteringtown is still actively farming. And we reside at a raw milk halal meat share farm operation by the name of Slack Market Farm, where Kenya Abraham, a Black Muslim woman, and her family own this farm, and they run basically a CSA of local meat and raw and pasteurized milk for human consumption. So people are doing very unique and exciting things. And we also want to fully engage our ag cluster by focusing on our chefs, focusing on our value-added product vendors who handcraft oftentimes their product from seed to the final product. So that could be Simply Made, which is a hemp oil, shea butter based body product line, or HG, Healthy Grooming, utilizing shea butter and eucalyptus. So folks are engaging with agriculture in a way that oftentimes they might not even know it. And that was, again, the beautiful part of me working at the Fayette Alliance and being able to have to quickly learn a lot of the language, get hip to what's happening, and then take that knowledge back to my community and be able to build up operations and build up economic development through assets that they already possess, be it their intellectual property, be it the land that they own, be it, the network that they're included with, or all three in a combination. So Ashley, you can continue to advance the slides, and we will conclude our time here for our Black Soil presentation. And I look forward to engaging with the cohort around question and answer, as well as hearing my respective panelists provide their presentations as well.
Ashley, thank you so much. We miss you at Fayette Alliance, but I'm so happy that you and Trevor are doing this work. It's so important for this community and for this state, and we're just really grateful for you sharing that with us. And I look forward to working together and figuring out how Fayette Alliance can support Black soil as well. So next we have Allison Davis.
All right, well, good evening, everybody. It's funny, I have been twice this month either following or in front of Ashley speaking, and it's not really fair because I'm going over data, and Ashley has this very compelling story that just everyone's very riveted by. So thanks a lot, Ashley. It was great to hear from you, and really love the work that you're doing. So I've worked a fair amount with Fayette Alliance over the last 5 or 6 years to provide some research that is designed to contextualize agriculture and its supporting industries as a driver of economic development in Lexington and surrounding areas. And so I won't spend a lot of time today presenting. I know that there were some resources that are shared with you that go through a lot of the research that we conducted, but I just wanted to give a bit of an overview of the Lexington economy where we can highlight the importance of agriculture and what I will call the cluster. But I want to contextualize it first so we understand what Lexington is. And Lexington is a thriving economy. Up until COVID, we had extremely low unemployment rates of 3.4%. That's below the natural rate of unemployment. So it's just amazing. And towards the end of the presentation, I will talk to you a bit about where we are now. But prior to COVID, we were sitting very well. This particular map, I think, to me, highlights why Lexington is so successful. I am a specialist around economic development across the state. And one of my constant messages is you have to have a diverse economy. Those places that have relied on a single industry to be the mainstay of jobs, income, their general vibrancy will suffer when that industry disappears. And certainly one of the best examples for that is in Appalachia with the reliance on the coal industry. And so if you look at this map, you can see kind of the greener, the dark purple, dark green colors represent those areas that are not very diverse in their economy. And the yellow represents very high diversity across industry. And one thing I love about Lexington is that it has a lot of diverse industry. So if you look at this pie chart, it's just amazing because there's so many colors and there's so many pie slices. And for the most part, there isn't one slice of the pie that dominates. And you'll see the largest pie is healthcare. Healthcare is an incredibly important industry, both in the fact that it serves its local residents as well as outlying patients, but it also is what we call an export industry. So it's money from outside coming in. So it's like an export, and it's something that helps kind of regenerate additional jobs and income. And so you can see across the county, we just have slices of pie everywhere. We've got healthcare, education, arts, retail. See a little slice there for agriculture that we're going to talk about, construction, manufacturing. So all the pieces of a local economy that we strive for. When we look at that just a little more detailed, and I'm not going to go through the numbers because it's past 5 o'clock in the evening and nobody wants to see that. But you can see that there are, paying pretty good jobs across a lot of our industries. Again, healthcare is our largest industry. Manufacturing is still an important part of Lexington, but Lexington is a service-based sector across all different types of services. So professional services, retail services, home-based services, just a lot of different activity going on. The one column I draw your attention to is what's called LQ. And LQ is what we call a location quotient. And what that does is it measures the relative intensity of a sector within a local geography. And if you look down that column, the largest LQ falls within agriculture. And so what that says to me is there's something special about this community because it has a larger concentration of agriculture, particularly because it's an urban area. So moving forward, it's really, really hard to see this, but this is the chart that I show when I'm talking to elected officials, community leaders, economic development professionals, because what it does is it highlights those emerging industries. It highlights those industries that have are kind of in a downturn. It highlights small industries that might have the potential to become really big. It highlights our anchor institutions, and it gives us some kind of prioritization for how we should proceed. And so what I typically tell my folks is that I'm looking for bubbles that are in the upper right-hand quadrant. And what that means is that these are industries that are growing, and these are industries that are paying high jobs. One of the things that we must insist on is that when we deploy economic development strategies, we're doing it for the good of the people. And that means that we're paying fair, above living wages, we're providing benefits, and that's often represented by the overall earnings for an individual. And so if I look in my upper left-hand quadrant, I see health and construction. I see a little dot here for agriculture. And this is for a larger cluster. The size of the bubble represents how many people are employed. So again, I look at this and I say, okay, Lexington, as we move forward, agriculture is on the table. All right, so this is the slide that I just keep doing different things with it. This is a report that we did in partnership with Fate Alliance about 3 years ago. Feels like 10 years ago, but 3 years ago. And in essence, what we were trying to do is really capture the importance and the value of agriculture to the bluegrass. And we wanted to highlight the top products in Fayette County. Certainly horses, we are the top horse county in the country. We look at breeding, cattle and calves were next, tobacco, and then we had grains. But I think Brittany mentioned this in her opening comments. What we did was we extended the definition of agriculture beyond on-farm production. And what there has been discussion in the past is that if you just look at jobs on the farm, it's not a very, very large number, and no one is expecting it to be. What's so special about agriculture in Lexington is that it is a unique cluster that you won't find in other places, but it all starts with what's on the farm. And these other types of businesses and industry have come to Central Kentucky to support what's going on the farm. And so at the end of the day, when we went through our analysis, and I'll show you a couple of figures in a second, we found that 1 out of every 12 jobs was directly or indirectly associated with agriculture. So if I go back a few slides, almost every single one of these pie slices has an agricultural component to it. And we were only able to capture businesses or industry that were 100% dedicated to agriculture. So the number is likely much larger. So we also found that ag accounts for about $2.3 billion in annual economic activity. And we wanted to highlight some of the types of supporting industry that are in Fayette County and surrounding areas. And certainly one of the best examples is Root and Riddle and Haggard as our two world-renowned equine veterinarians. But it's not just about jobs. Certainly that's important and it's a trigger for a certain audience. But for those of us who live in Lexington, we live there because of the rural landscape that it provides. And I know I'm not the only one who was recruited into Lexington and was flown in over Keeneland as a recruiting tool. And as I was flying in, I used to live in Reno, Nevada, which doesn't have grass, or if it does, you have to pay $1,000 a day for it. It's the landscape that I've always dreamed of. And so before the plane had even touched down, my decision was made. And so it is a tremendous recruitment and retention tool for what we're trying to attract, which are innovative and talented workers. During this time, and I think my colleague Lori Garkovich is on this presentation, but we didn't just look at numbers. Lori went and she interviewed some of the largest firms in the city that have nothing to do with agriculture. And we asked them, you know, is this important? And why is this important? And they all said it was important. It's important because it's a quality of life for their workforce that they can't find anywhere else. And I think that's a really, really critical piece of having that diverse economy. We also completed another study where we were trying to understand, we got the perspective of the employer as a recruitment and retention tool, but we were trying to understand, you know, how important is it as a resident? You know, so we asked, we sent out a really big survey across the city and tried to get at, you know, are you willing to pay to maintain the amenity that's this rural landscape? And essentially what it boiled down to is the PDR program something that would be, you know, valuable to an everyday resident of the community? And how did that vary by individuals who were part of the agricultural sector versus those who weren't? And what was interesting is that the results that we came up with was that people were willing to pay essentially what the current price of the PDR is per capita. So it worked out to be pretty darn dead on to what the current price is. We want to provide some better understanding of the types of jobs that are associated with agriculture. We certainly have a lot of these on-farm jobs. We also have ag-related jobs that extend beyond the farm. In addition, as there are continued development pressures and as the number of farms across the country are decreasing, we want to have a better understanding of what a loss in ag would mean for not just ag, but for sectors that buy and sell from ag. And so we found that there were just a slew of industries that would be significantly impacted if there was just a 10% loss in ag sales. And so you can see these are some really critical industries to the city and to our region. And so we can't discount what that would mean in the future. This is the chart that's made its rounds, and what it is trying to identify is all the different types of supporting sectors that are in just this county that are here to support agricultural production, either as an input to or as a buyer from. And so you'll see sort of the center is these are our farms. And then the lighter purple are what goes into producing things. So we've got agricultural inputs, and these are the traditional ways we measure ag, these inputs and food processing and manufacturing. But what we did was extend it to all these different services that we found. And we spent weeks over Christmas going through essentially a phone book to find every single business that we knew that 100% supported agriculture. And so anything from all tech to different veterinary services to real estate to legal to all of our organizations and associations that either are out at the horse park or Kentucky Cattlemen's, all the trucking and the bluegrass stockyards, these all have to be considered part of the agricultural sector. If you lose that center circle, those other circles go away. So I wanted to end with, what does COVID-19 mean for Lexington? And I just wanted to share one thing is that, man, we bounce back. And while in May of 2020, our unemployment rate was 11% across the state, we are back down to almost our normal levels. And so we are a tough, and we're just a tough economy, and we will persevere. One of the key pieces of being able to recover was having businesses having access to the Paycheck Protection Program. And what I did was I pulled all of the loans that I could find that were allocated to our agricultural businesses just in the county. So through just those 4 months of PPP and through the end of, I guess, June, the Paycheck Protection Program supported over 2,000 jobs specifically related to ag. I did not go through lawyers and accountants, and these were just ones that were just obvious. These were our farms, these were our veterinarians, these were our associations. And so we had about $5.6 million over 138 loans for smaller loans, those that are under $150,000, to support 774 ag jobs. We had 33 big loans that supported almost 1,500 jobs. So it is a thing. And I thought this was just a great way to end, to show that, this is a big part of our economy, and it is, nicely represented among all of our other sectors. So I think with that, I'm ready to move on.
Yeah. Well,
thank
you. No, we're so grateful for the work that you do for Fate Alliance and through UK and CDIC. Our organization has always been very data driven, and we believe that promoting our farmland as part of our mission is a very important aspect of our community. But we, also want to make sure that the data supports that. And so your work diving into that is just always so insightful. I always learn something new whenever I hear you speak, and it's much appreciated. So I'd like to introduce and welcome Greg Harbett to share his screen to talk about the equine industry.
Good evening, everyone. I won't be before you very long, but I just want to give a quick presentation as someone who works directly in agriculture and in the equine industry, how important the equine industry is to Kentucky, but as well as on the international stage. Give you a little background about my family history, what I do, and show you two videos for those of you who've never been on a horse farm, sort of what goes on behind the scenes, and to also show you what it's like to go to a public sale auction and some of the activity and the international players that come into Lexington specifically for the equine athletes. My name is Greg Harbett. I'm the president of Harbett Bloodstock. You can go to the next slide, actually. I'm a third generation horseman. My great grandfather was the legendary groom for Man of War. Many of you have been on Man of War in Lexington, but Man of War was considered to be the greatest racehorse of all time. A few years back, a lot of key industry people recognized him with that honor. My grandfather had a deep relationship with the horse. My grandfather died about 3 weeks before the horse, and the horse died 3 weeks later, many people say, of a broken heart. My grandfather was Tom Harbett, who was very famous in Lexington and was a very noted horseman. He worked with a lot of major owners in his day, Cosmetic Queen Elizabeth Arden, Louis B. Meyer from MGM Studios. He ultimately ended up retiring as the general manager for Harry F. Guggenheim, who was one of the richest men in the world at that time. But he also owned and bred a horse in 1962 that ran in the Kentucky Derby. So he's one of the very few African-American men who's actually owned a horse that's ran in the Kentucky Derby. So next slide. So as I said before, I am a third generation horseman continuing on the legacy. I've always had a deep love and affection for the horses for as long as I can remember. I got my start once I graduated high school. About 3 days later, I actually went and interned with Tom Amos in Louisville on the racetrack. A lot of people called me crazy, said, what are you doing? But before I went to school, I did the internship, sort of learned about horsemanship, what it's like to work around the equine athletes, and just get a feel for that. While I was attending school in North Carolina, I was very fortunate to land a spot on a program called the Darley Flying Start. Brittany, I think you're familiar with that as your husband participated in that, but it's a great program where they select 12 kids internationally to be able to travel the world, learn every aspect of the equine industry from key industry leaders. And the program was really just invaluable with just, having a very formal education in the industry. So next slide. So here is a video for those of you who are familiar with a horse farm. I apologize ahead of time, but for those of you who are not, I think this is very interesting just to see what it is an actual working horse farm, the amount of people that it takes to have the finished product, which is the horse. Actually, I sent you the links. Is that going to play? I'm sorry, Brittany, is she having difficulty playing that?
Oh, I was playing it, but maybe you all can't hear it. Hang on, let me try again. Can you see,
big dream.
Can you see the screen?
I can hear it now, but I can't see it.
Okay. Let's see. I just have to fix it real quick.
And then we work towards it.
Let me start it over.
So I just want to give you a glimpse into what it's like on a horse farm, the jobs that it provides, the economic impact that it has on a whole lot of levels, and just the care that these equine athletes receive. So I think that this video would do a better job of showing it as opposed to me trying to explain it to you. So.
I'm a big believer in trying to be the best you can possibly be. We take the big dream and then we work towards it.
Kenny sets the tone for Winstar Farm through his desire to be the best.
You do all the little things that other people are really not willing to do, that'll make the difference. Making sure that the horseshoes are on right, the feet are trimmed, looking at the horses every day, making sure that everything's going right with them.
We touch so many different facets of the industry. We have a great stallion along with great stallions. We have brood mares. We have a training center. The training center has a 7 furlong ollie track. It also has an uphill component. We have the ability to turn them out. We have the ability to swim. We have a hyperbaric chamber. We have an underwater aqua tread, hot walking machine, cold water, salt water, aqua spa. We've tried to think of every possible thing. We're not done. We've been blessed to win the Derby. We've been blessed to finish second and third in it. We've been blessed to win the Belmont. Drosselmeyer been second twice, won the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Look where we started out, 400 acres, and now we're at over 2,300 acres. We continue to keep growing the number of stallions we have and mares.
Passionate about where Winstar can be 10 years from now, what we can accomplish as a team.
If you want to have that big dream and you want to get to that big dream, you've got to work hard at it.
Winstar Farm, dedicated to the dream.
So as you can see from that video, there's a lot of components. There's a lot of people that make the everyday sacrifices to take care of the horses, which provides a lot of jobs. This is a cool little chart here. You look at the horse farms in the middle, the different disciplines behind it, but then you look at all the professional services that need to go along with that. Equine health services, farm-related services, anywhere from your hay person to construction, businesses. You know, you saw saddles there. That somebody, you know, it's a lot of employment that goes into one horse. I'll go to the next slide and just talk about some numbers. It's no secret when you fly in, you know, we're known as the horse capital of the world. I've been very fortunate to travel to Europe, Japan, Middle East, and anyone who knows anything about the horse business is just in awe that we come from Lexington. That's something a lot of Lexingtonians really don't pay attention to unless you are in the horse business, but Kentucky is synonymous with horses. It's very vital to our industry, pumps an estimated $6.5 billion into the Kentucky's economy. Generates between 80 to 100,000 jobs annually. What makes us so special is the stallions that we have in Kentucky. We have some of the most sought after and elite stallions in the world, with stallion fees ranging from 2,000 on upwards to 300,000. But more specifically, our two sales company, Phasic Tipton and Keeneland Sales, last year combined You can see the total there, $763,895,000 worth of horses were traded through those true auction houses. I mean, that is just phenomenal in itself. If you go to the next slide, please. As I said before, I am a bloodstock agent. For those of you who are not familiar with a bloodstock agent, I'll try to give you some insight. But basically what I do is try to predict the future for my clients before the future happens. I use a lot of things to look at pedigree, I look at video evaluation, I look at the actual physical confirmation of a horse. Sometimes I go to public auction and represent the client. A lot of times I do private transactions. I am a private bloodstock agent, which means I work for several clients. There are some bloodstock agents that work specifically for a farm or a sales company. So you can see me there at Keeneland going over some form with some of my clients with a horse that we had in the background that was going to run later that day. So next slide, please. And this is the last video I want to show you guys. I thought this would be special to bring it up last. I was able to show you the farm, but without the farm, we can't get to the sale. But the sale is really where the magic happens. And you'll see some examples of the international buyers that have come over to participate, to dump money into the economy of Kentucky, as well as just see what the prices some of these horses go for. I think it'll be very interesting to see for those of you who are not familiar.
So I think the market is telling us that the really breeding stock, based on what the yearling sales have been, what the racing year has been, people are willing to really pay for good breeding stock.
And 180 now, consigned by Gainsway as agent for Normandy Farm is Daddy's Little Darling.
3536 on her, and you would thank you. Anybody else? 3,600,000. 3536. 356 now. We'll say Tom. 3569. In the back, 3,500,000. Thank you, Steve.
It was bittersweet towards the end, you know. Almost didn't want to sell it towards the end. Sometimes you got to sell it.
188 next. What a story here. Tailor-made sales agency, Song of Bernadette, a dark prayer brown 9-year-old mare by Bernardini. One of the most exciting 3-year-olds we've seen in a long time in Catholic Boy.
I was really bittersweet. Fortunately, it's going to really a better home than we have going to Bridalwood. I couldn't be happier to know that that's where Song of Bernadette is going to be.
Here is the beautiful mare, the Galileo filly, Galileo Gal.
Well done, $1,450,000 and $1,400,000 right there, Blake. Well done. Thank you.
The wonderful mare stopped charging, Maria.
$1,450,000 and Woody, $4,400,000 in the back. Well done. Thank you. 7,400,000, John. So you would get there to line to 4. You would get there now 5. You would get line to 7,500,000. That's 7,400,000 now 5. You would get line to 5 down 5. That's 7,400,000 now 5. You would get there to line to 7,500,000. 5 now 6. That's 7,600,000. You would get. You're all out of here now. 7,500,000. 7,600,000. That's 7,500,000 now 600. You would get there to line to 6. You would get there to 7,500,000. 7,600,000. You would get there to line to 6 and a half. Last call. $7,600,000 and Tom, $7,500,000. Thank you very much. That's a great mare. Congratulations.
This is a unique atmosphere because you've got a lot of really high quality bloodstock condensed into a very short time span. I think kind of boosts the electricity and the momentum in the ring, and everybody can see each other, who their competition is bidding. It's kind of a unique atmosphere.
Fast 15 did a great job putting that catalog together and securing the entries that they did.
And I think, yes, I was told that we had 10 minutes. I wanted to be well within time. Hopefully this is giving you a slight glimpse into the equine industry, which is just one of the components of the agricultural phase of Kentucky, but it's one that I'm very passionate about. I certainly hope it's around for a number of years after I am gone from here. So I've enjoyed presenting my industry, something I'm very passionate about, and look forward to asking any questions at a later time should you guys have any.
Thank you so much, Greg. We appreciate that. I remember seeing that horse sale. I was there. It was wild.
Yeah, it was magical.
It really was. It was something. And, you know, thank you so much for sharing that information with us. And I hope for all of you, you know, attending this evening that each of these three presenters gave you a different perspective on this, you know, this industry that we know as agriculture and, you know, this green, beautiful landscape that is the most productive landscape in the world. You know, what it brings to our community and something that Greg touched on a little bit too. And I want to emphasize, I know at least last year at the Keeneland September sale, you know, there were people from 45 different countries that came to Lexington to purchase horses that, you know, spending money that goes into our tourism and our hospitality and our economy. And that indirectly, like Allison mentioned, you know, supports the hotel industry and the restaurant industry, that supports Visit Lex, which is our tourism industry. And, you know, these things are so intertwined. And I think it's just incredible hearing from all three of you about how these things intertwine to support our community. So thank you all so much. We do have some questions. So I'm going to ask you all to speak on those. And just pull back up here. All right. So let's see. This first question is for Allison Davis. And the question is from Christine Stanley. Are our undocumented agricultural workers included in the jobs numbers?
No, they are not. H-2A workers, which are documented, are included, but not those that are undocumented.
Gotcha. And I think, you know, that does go to that point that with that data and research is a very conservative estimate, you know, because it was what can you directly tie there?
Yes.
So I think that is an important point to make, that there are many more jobs and really crucial parts of
Absolutely
that industry that are represented there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, there is a question about what's happening with initiatives from the mayor's office and Ashton Potter Wright's work there. And Allison, I don't know if you can speak to that at all. That's something that I'm happy to answer afterwards, but I didn't know if you could speak to that or not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to start it because I think it fits in line with
absolutely
some of the discussions about important economic clusters. So Ashton in the previous administration was largely working with farm to table initiatives and really trying to shore up relationships between producers and institutional buyers and restaurants. When Mayor Gorton came on, she expanded Ashton's role to really make, to emphasize an economic development strategy that is designed to attract and create ag tech businesses. We believe that Lexington is really an ideal location to support those types of initiatives, both with existing industry, with my lovely employer, the College of Agriculture, and having a really strong Kentucky Department of Ag that supports this. That is a targeted cluster for the city that I think Ashton is working towards. So Brittany, if you want to add anything, by all means.
No, I think that's certainly something I can link to in the follow-up email, which I'll be doing. If we don't get to your question this evening, we'll be sending out a follow-up tomorrow before noon, and we'll link and have resources to answer any of the questions that we don't get to this evening. But that's a great platform start, and I'll try to include more information. For Ashley and Greg, because I know, Allison, you spoke to this a little bit as well, but in light of COVID-19, what impacts do you all foresee regarding, regarding the aspect of agriculture that you spoke with us about in Kentucky as a whole? And, how too can we, in addition to what impact will COVID have on those industries, how can we as citizens further support the work that you do? How can we support the work that you do? So twofold question for Ashley and Greg to answer there.
So thinking about COVID-19 and the rapid exposure of existing health disparities, as well as the exposure for opportunity for small scale farmers, there is a kind of a balancing act that Black Soil is focusing on in positioning its producers to be ready and prepared to leverage their produce towards helping close the gap for health disparities, and then also still be able to cultivate their relationships and have them still doing meaningful work while they're sustaining their own farms. So when COVID-19 hit, we had to quickly transition our in-person events to delivering, seed starter kits. Our farmers were already ready. They'd already been on track. That frost in May, obviously hurt everyone. But folks were able to very quickly source local meat and seasonal produce when the season hit in early June.
That's great. And that's, I think been something that we've seen this year is how important buying local is, knowing where your food comes from and shoring up that food supply chain. And I know I have thoroughly enjoyed my Black Soil CSA, and I'm so glad that I saw that you all opened up a new offering as well. And it may already be sold out, I suppose, but I did see that this week. So how can we and community members that are listening in support Black Soil and your work?
So right now we're looking for the next step. As I stated in our presentation, we've done this amount of work in less than 3 years, and we're looking to establish infrastructure, brick and mortars here in Lexington, Fayette County, because we, through COVID-19 and the increase of demand for local seasonal produce, have rapidly been strategically sourcing restaurants and families and weekly farm shares. And we need a fulfillment center to help us be able to safely store this product coming from our rural areas, and then be able to retail and source it throughout communities after we've fed and nourished that direct community in which we're in. So we've got some leads that we're excited to be able to share with some folks in the upcoming weeks that look promising. So that's one way. Be on the lookout for a future kind of fulfillment center. But as we work towards that, we do have a campaign through our charitable fund held at the Lyric Theater. You can log on to lexingtonlyric.com or to blacksoilky.com and hit donate now, and it'll take you there. And it'll really lay out the ways in which we're looking for support. We currently provide weekly meals and CSA shares to socially and financially vulnerable communities. And we're sourcing and covering about 10 to 12 families right now. So if you want to pay it forward, there's a weekly deduction that can come out to help advance that. You can make a donation to the Kentucky Black Farmer Fund, and there are other things that you can do, but those are the kind of 3 concise ways. Help us, affirm and manifest a brick and mortar fulfillment center here in Lexington, be able to help us sustain our work through donating to our charitable fund, and then helping the larger development and sustainability of Black agriculture here in the state through a donation to the Kentucky Black Farmer Fund.
Wonderful. And everybody, we will again follow up with some of these resources tomorrow. So if you didn't catch those, I did put the Black Soil website here in the chat, and they were also included on the resource email that we sent out yesterday. Greg, can you speak a little bit to the impacts of COVID or what you're anticipating for the equine industry, for your work, you know, as we round out 2020 with the upcoming sales, and also how can people get involved if they have not been involved in the horse industry? Well, how do you recommend that people get involved and support our signature industry here?
Great questions. COVID thus far has had an impact on the equine industry as far as racing goes. Most tracks are not allowing spectators. Keeneland canceled their meet altogether and went to a 5-day meet. So it has had an impact. I think we will really see the true impact in the upcoming months. You have the Kentucky Derby coming up. Will they still push forward? And if so, will they still allow the spectators that they are anticipating? We also have the largest yearling sale in the world coming up, which is the Keeneland September sale. That's going to be a telltale sign. We still don't know if the European buyers will be allowed to come over and participate. We don't know if the buyers coming over from Asia will be able to participate. If they don't participate, will Americans step up to cover that buffer that so many people depend on from an economic standpoint of selling their horses to those type of buyers? We also have Breeders' Cup coming up, which is an international event that's held in the U.S. on a rotating basis at different racetracks across the world. So we really have 3 major events coming up in the next 2.5 to 3 months that will really give us a greater idea of what COVID has meant to the equine industry. Thus far, it has affected us, but we've still been blessed to be able to operate. In reference to what you can do, what was your question, the last part?
Well, just what are people that, you know, have not been involved in the horse business in the past, you know, maybe have attended Keeneland or something like that. Are there any ways that you would recommend? You know, I think even letting people know, you know, that you can attend the sales, and, you know, just recommendations for people that they could get involved if they're curious.
If you haven't attended Keeneland, I recommend that to anyone. I've been able to go to pretty much every major racetrack in the U.S. and some outside of the U.S. And Keeneland is in my top 5. It's a beautiful gym that we have right here in our backyard. As you had just mentioned, it doesn't cost to go to the horse sales. So if you've never been to a horse sale, I would highly suggest to go. There's a lot of racing clubs that you can get involved in racing for low barometer of entry point. You won't own a big percentage of a horse, but you will still have the feeling of horse ownership, and participating in forums such as this today to learn something new that you may have otherwise not known about with a particular discipline of agriculture. So I think those are all ways to get involved and be better informed.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I do want to leave some time for our breakout sessions. That's such an important part of Citizens Planning Academy, is being able to talk together in these breakout sessions about what you learned today and what you're more curious about. And so, like I mentioned, if we did not answer your question right now and you did put it in the chat, we'll be following up with answers for those questions tomorrow in our follow-up email. We'll be sending out some additional resources as well. I'm so grateful to Ashley, Allison, and Greg for sharing your knowledge and your experiences with us. They're so valuable. And I think these you know, forums and conversations, community-wide conversations that we can have, are how we continue this work. And I'm, you know, so happy to support all of you in your work. And we will be breaking into our breakout sessions here in just a moment. You will have to click enter the breakout session. And we would also ask that you appoint someone in the breakout group, a leader, discussion leader, to take notes, someone to guide everyone through the questions. So as long as you're able to stay and discuss with your group, if one person could take notes, we'd love for you to send those afterwards to info@fayealliance.com following the breakout session. We will be sharing those notes with the rest of the constituents, again, in our follow-up email, which will be a comprehensive resource, answering questions and sharing notes from all of the groups. So please, if you're able to stay, and to our speakers and presenters, if you're able to join a breakout session, please do. If not, we completely understand and want to respect your time as well. But thank you all for being involved. Once the breakout sessions are over, we'll give you all about 10 minutes for the breakout sessions. We'll ask you to come back and we'll finally close it out. But again, thank you everybody so much for your time, especially to our panelists. We've learned a lot, and we look forward to continuing the conversations with you. So we'll be going into our breakout session here in a moment, and we hope as many people as can join that we'll see you momentarily.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. I think I can hear. Oh, I can't hear.
Now you can hear me, I bet.
Hi. Thanks for being willing to stay on a few minutes longer and chat about all the great stuff we heard. I'm Ashley. I work at Fate Alliance, but I do not have to lead this discussion. If one of you wants to, just talk about the questions, we have some guiding questions. We don't have to use those. What do you all think? Want to use them?
I can take notes.
Oh, awesome. That'd be really helpful. And you can just send it to that email address, info@fatealliance.com. Cool.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to lead the questions then. Let me pull them up. Let's see.
Go ahead. I am very sleepy today, so I'm not very good at.
No, I totally hear you. Almost Wednesday, almost halfway there. So what did you find most interesting about today's presentation? First question.
So I was not aware of the Black Soil organization. I definitely think that that's interesting. I didn't know really what the breakdown of Black ownership of farms in the state was, and I'm already trying to think of ways that I work at the College of Pharmacy. I'm trying to think of ways that we can incorporate that organization into things that we do.
Yeah, that is amazing. And I didn't know, I honestly learned a whole lot tonight too. I'm new at Fate Alliance. I actually took over Ashley Smith's position and after she left to start Black Soil. So yeah, I mean, they're doing incredible work.
Yeah, I know Ashley, have known Ashley since before she was working at the Lyric, even. Good. So, but I did not know really, I think, the scope of what Black Soil does. And so that was really, I learned a lot about just everything that they do tonight. So I was really glad to get to hear that. And I'm really glad to hear about trying to kind of recenter equity as part of all of these conversations that we're having. So that was an excellent part.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's so important that we talk about equity in all of this, in farming and land use, especially land use, and in farming, especially just all the history of injustices in those areas is really important to recognize and move forward in the best way and advocate for better policies from our elected officials here locally. So another question is, what areas mentioned today would you like more information about? I know for me, I still am always wanting to know more about Black farmers in Kentucky, looking at trying to work with Ashley more on that and just see how we can uplift that even more through Fate Alliance as well.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know, and I didn't think to ask, is there a presence, does Black Soil have a presence at the Lexington Farmers Market, since that's one of the largest farmers markets in the area, or are there any Black farmers at the farmers market? Are there what's the breakdown there, and are there ways that we can support them more?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would love to know too. I want to say, I thought I saw in Ashley's presentation one of the farms. I don't know if it's one that they support or is a Black farm, but I noticed the name and I've seen it. I think it's the Need More Acres or something farm that I've seen at the farmers market myself. But that's a great question. What else?
I honestly knew a lot about the horse industry, so I think the Blackstyle thing was the most interesting thing for me.
Yeah. And so how can our community increase or improve support of agriculture?
I think more stuff like this. I think a lot of people think, oh, I work in, I work at Toyota. The horse industry has nothing to do with me, or, I'm a teacher. The cattle, the beef cattle have absolutely nothing to do with me. But more stuff like this that shows people how interconnected everyone is.
Yeah.
One of the organizations that the College of one of the events that the College of Pharmacy has started to put on is something called Everything is Science. And we would love to have more stuff like this that is local and shows people, different aspects of farming in the area, or different aspects of, the horse industry, or, just stuff like this that's very locally connected is the most impactful, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, I think that, obviously, just supporting with your dollars is important, and being aware. I'm always thinking about connections to. I work for the food bank, so I think about when Ashley started mentioning some of the food insecurity rates that she saw and how they're lining up. Hers were a little more national, but I've got some more insight into some of the details of the Kentucky rates themselves, and how the Department of Ag has worked to try to promote local farmers, Kentucky Proud farmers, but it also help them facilitate donation of product through the food bank, and help them recoup some of that loss they might lose with seconds or surplus or imperfects that often get thrown away. But yeah, I don't even know if that really answers the question we were talking about. I just keep thinking about it and all the interconnectedness of it.
Yeah, no, it all really is so interconnected. I think that's why it's so good we had Dr. Davis on, who really shows that connection through her research of how it is so connected to literally everything. And I know that's something we've done a lot of education on at Beta Alliance in the past, and I look forward to continuing that, but expanding it as well. What are some ways you can increase, we already talked about that. What benefits do agriculture and farmland bring to Fayette County? Similar to what we were already talking about, I think, but what do you all think about that?
Beauty, for one.
Yeah.
For sure. Most obvious.
Yeah, it really makes Lexington unique. And it's a place that I want to live because of the agriculture and farmland. Like, it's not just another city on the interstate.
Yeah, I think so too. I left for 5 years. I went to UK. I basically grew up here. I grew up in Clark County, and went to UK and then left, but wanted to come back the whole time. And there really is nowhere like Lexington. There really isn't. Are you all from here?
Mm-hmm.
I've lived here since 2003.
I tried to leave and I ended up back here sort of against my will, and then now I'm just stuck, so we're good.
Yeah, it's great. And I agree. It's the agriculture, it's the farms, it's the horses that really make it unique.
But we do have a good access because of that too to good local produce.
Mm-hmm.
It's more accessible to us than it is in some places.
Oh yeah, definitely.
There's still some problems with that, but we do have at least proximity to a lot of stuff that other cities don't always have as easily.
Yeah, and I was floored, when I came to Fayette Alliance, started last month. I didn't even know that it really is the factory floor of our county that you know, like Dr. Davis was talking about, of how connected it is, and it really drives $2.3 billion into our city, right? And I just can't imagine if we didn't have all of that, you know, what the city would be. What does smart growth look like related to our county's agriculture industry?
Well, I mean, we've definitely got to not expand so much that we destroy the land. I mean, and we've also got to make it accessible for people who can't, you know, get a CSA or go to the UPIC farm or, you know, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
And figuring out ways to actually have some farmland accessible in Fayette County or near Fayette County, that's also affordable for folks who want to actually start small farms.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, I just got a notification. The room will be ending in 54 seconds. Well, we still have 52 seconds. But yes, I agree. You know, I think it is really important to see how our city can also make it more accessible to the farmland. And that's why I love Seed Leaf too. If you all have heard of Seed Leaf, how they have the gardens and trying to make, you know, urban agriculture is something I'm really interested in, and how that's accessible to a lot of folks too, like where they can walk to it even.
Yeah, urban gardens, I think, I don't think Lexington has nearly enough of those. In fact, do we have any of those? You know, the urban community gardens, can we promote those more?
Yeah, that is perfect. I know Seed Leaf does have some, and we're actually going to have it's going to cut me off.
Hey, Miss Allison.
Hi, Lori. Your face wasn't on there earlier.
Yeah, I didn't have it on. Yeah, I didn't have it on. But I loved it. Hey, Tom.
I know you're like a celebrity.
No, Tom's also lives out here in Woodford County and is part of the Woodford Coalition Group.
Yeah, you guys are Woodford County Fayetans.
Yes, exactly.
We're glad you're here from Woodford County. Well, thank you all so much. And thank you for your time in the breakout rooms. I'm sorry. You know, I always hate to cancel those because it's really when it starts getting going, but we're trying to be respectful of your evening time. But again, just as a reminder, if the person who did take notes could send those to info@fayettaalliance.com, we'd greatly appreciate it. We'd love to share those notes with the rest of the group so everyone can know what people are talking about. You know, it's good for us. We want to know what you all are curious about, what you learned, what you're interested in knowing more information about. So like I mentioned multiple times now, we will be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow with additional resources. We'll be answering questions that I wasn't able to get to in the chat, or maybe that came up in your group discussions that you do want to know more about, and that we can easily provide resources to. In addition to those resources being available in the email that went out yesterday, I also wanted to remind everybody that those resources will also be available on our website. So if you're curious, something down the line, you obviously don't want to search through your emails. If you go to Fayette Alliance to our CPA section, you will be able to find the resources that we shared with you. And I highly recommend, if you have some time, looking through those. We've included research and interviews and videos and all kinds of links to sites that we think would be really, really, really worth your time in furthering this conversation. So in addition to that information that will be included tomorrow, please try and fill out the 4-question survey on this week's session that we will send out in the email. And be on the lookout for information email next Monday that will prepare you for week 3 of CPA, Responsible Infrastructure. So thank you all for your time and your open discussion. And we so look forward to hosting you all for session 3, Responsible Infrastructure, which will be next week at 5:30 sharp. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us tonight. Special thanks to our panelists and to Farm Bureau for sponsoring our session this evening. Everyone have a wonderful night.